What is up, guys? Happy Saturday. Welcome to the third episode of Questions Unraveled. Gonna give everybody a second to hop on. Make sure you like and share out to all your friends. Let them know what's going on this week, that you're going to be talking and listening to all things about childhood trauma. Just going to give everybody a second to hop on. Hope you guys had a great week and are looking forward to some connectivity as well as some in-depth conversations with us today. Make sure you like and share for me. So excited to have this topic today, all about childhood trauma and how it affects you, as well as how to overcome it. We're going to get started here in the next few seconds. Go ahead and give one good share for me, and I will get us started here. All right, guys, let's get this thing rolling. Hey everybody, it is Emily over here with BetheChange. Today's episode is all about childhood trauma. So the guest that I have for you guys today is Kendall Parker. She is a very close friend of mine, as well as someone that has not only empowered me, but has kept me sane over the past few years. We all know that, the past 2 years actually have kind of sucked. So we're going to get a little more in depth about what childhood trauma has effectively on not only your neuro system, but your ability to actively become an adult. Because, we have this trauma and these things that we go through and we look around and we're like, okay, I didn't think I was going to make it this far. Here I am. I'm in my early 20s and I'm shocked that I made it. Now, how do I get to the next step? How do I find, build relationships or the job, all these things. So that is what Kendall and I are going to talk about today. So quickly, I'm going to give you a good brief on her. She is with Fashionista for Everybody, one of the amazing companies based out of Nashville, Tennessee, that is all about education on fashion being for everyone, because nobody is not allowed to be beautiful. And that is what they push. And she is also an activist for all lives and everyone, especially children and women that have went through sexual assault. And we're just going to bring her on here and let her give an intro. So everybody, welcome Kendall Parker. What is up? How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I am good. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad that you're with us today. I just want to, reiterate the whole fact of the reason that I brought you on the show. And that was, not only are you a great friend of mine, and we have, this history where we've talked about all the crazy things that have happened to us, but we have the same vision and the same goal alignment, and that's to incite change. So I'm kind of gonna give you the floor. Can't talk today, and just kind of let you go from there and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, based in Nashville, Tennessee, and one of my main things that I do is being directly involved with Fashionista for Everybody, and we are a nonprofit that enables and chooses to empower people by using the transformative power of fashion with every single body type, every race, gender, sexual identity, physical ability, whatever the case might be, with local designers. And I also am a big advocate for survivors of sexual assault and not allowing your trauma to become you, but how you can use it to become the best version of you and continue to grow and better yourself constantly.
Isn't that just beautiful, guys? So when I initially found Fashionista for Everybody, I had no idea, no clue what I was doing. And the founder absolutely changed my life and got me connected with Kendall as well. And I remember finding not only joy, but the ability to see myself as beautiful. And I think that's something that every person deserves to experience. And I just want to kind of pull that directly into where we're heading, and that is the trauma itself. So I know personally when I dealt with my trauma, and I'm still dealing with it and probably will until the day that I die, one of the things that I struggled with was allowing myself to feel pretty, allowing myself to feel validated. Were there ever times along the way of you not only healing, but finding yourself that you were like, I'm not pretty. I'm not good enough. Did you experience that?
Yeah, and still every day, and that's something that to give a little bit of context, if you will. There's a growing, and I know you understand this as somebody with curves. You don't, they just don't happen overnight, and they usually spring on when you're younger,
Mm-hmm.
and girls make you feel gross for that, and guys are like, this is great, and then you don't realize that when you're young. Even if you're like 14, 15, you're like, oh, whatever. It doesn't click in because you have a child's mind. But as you get older and you start dealing with it, there's some days where I wake up and I walk past the mirror and I'm like, I am the ugliest person to exist. And that just crosses my, and I'm like, oh. And then I notice on those days that if I choose not to speak love into myself, it affects everything else. I have no energy to do anything. I choose to eat bad. I don't try to even get out of my pajamas and into work clothes because I work from home, and I'm like, no. And so it's something I kind of had to actively choose to do every single day, to choose to love myself.
I definitely feel the same way about that. And I think a lot of people do. You know, when I think about when I really started dealing with the things that happened to me, whether it was, abuse, sexual assault, whatever, I realized that I never let myself develop because that was just taken from me.
Mhm.
And a lot of children that experience sexual assault or abuse early on into their childhood, as they start to grow, their development is affected. And so many people don't look at that and go, that makes sense. So many people go, no, that's just something bad that happened to someone and they should move forward. And that's not the case. And I know that when I started actually going, oh, we've hit our 20s, we're here. We made it through the addiction and the sexual assault, and we made it through the rape trial. I was like, what the hell do I do now? And all these neurons were firing, and I was like, I don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to function. And this panic came over me because I felt like I did not have the tools to be an adult. And I don't know if you can relate to that at all, but I struggle with that so badly.
Yeah, I really did. And I mean, my abuse started when I was about 7 or 8 and ended when I was about 13. So very pivotal times of your brain growing was completely diminished by abuse. And so your brain it changes into survival mode and is like, whatever. It's not thinking about anything else. But then you also you're like, all right, I'm going to think like an adult at this moment, because that's how trauma works in your brain. There's no other way around it. Um, and so it wasn't until I hit about my 20s and I had done therapy twice, didn't work because I didn't want it to work, didn't care. That I knew for me that I had two choices. It was either my life was going to end or I get better. There wasn't any other option at that point. And I was like, well, one of my biggest fears is death, so we're not doing that. um, so I had to get as low as I possibly could in every sense of the way. And that's for me personally, that I had to I was like, I have nowhere else to go but to get help and improve. Um, but I didn't know how to human in like a normal sense. And by that, I mean, I didn't know how to have conversations with people and it not be surface level. I didn't know how to take care of myself in more than just doing the basics to survive. And you don't realize that once trauma has kind of taken over your brain, it's like it doesn't have the skills to human sometimes. It's just like I had to work on keeping you alive. That's about as good as I got.
Right. And it's so interesting. I was actually reading a study this week because even though I have my own personal experience with trauma, there are so many other variables that people experience. And it was a study that was actually done in Harvard. Let me make sure I give you guys the right name because I think everyone should read it. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. So what this is they correlate if your parents were divorced, if you grew up in a drug addicted home, if you grew up in abuse, sexual assault, all those variables, not like you failing a math test. I'm talking about trauma, that lovely word. And within those tests, they call it an ACE. So each variable consists of, oh, your parents were divorced? That's one ACE. Oh, you were sexually assaulted or molested? You've got two now. All of these things. And when someone hits the 4, which is not hard to do in our society, it's not hard to experience your parents going through divorce or sexual assault or being exposed to something you should not be exposed to. So you rack up 4 pretty quick. Are 12 times more likely to develop diseases, cancer, heart disease, those leading factors that kill people. So it's directly correlated with our health. And so many people don't realize that about trauma, especially at a childhood level. So when you start talking about that fight or flight mode, like you had just said, when we were created, the fight or flight mode was really for if we ran into a bear in the forest and you were like, oh God, that adrenaline's pumping. Now I either will fight the bear or I'm going to run from it. But what do we do when the bear comes home every single night? When you're dealing with the bear day to day to day, and what is the effect that it has on the development of a child and how the brain works and the neuron functioning and their ability to think. And you start thinking about the frontal cortex where decision-making skills are made and impulse control. And I know that something that I struggled with so badly and still struggle with is impulse. I get so angry, or, someone tells me I'm pretty and I'm like, why? Because it's that fear that I feel. And it was so interesting to read that study and go, wow, we're starting to connect the dots in society, and we're starting to, talk about these things. And yeah, just like you said, trauma does become normal, but it's not supposed to be. And that study just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. I could not believe it. But everyone, make sure you go and look at the adverse childhood experiences because it definitely directly correlates to health. And I don't know about you guys, but I want to be healthy. Let's see. Oh, it looks like Kendall is froze, so I will keep talking. Anyways, childhood trauma in itself has so many different variables. And I know with my personal story and the way that it happened, I had no idea where I was going. And I know that a lot of people feel like that when they experience trauma or they experience hardship or loss or divorce. And I think the biggest thing for me is just learning that, oh, I think we've got her back.
Yeah, sorry. I
No, you're so fine.
don't know what
I was
happened
like,
just in that.
Oh, all right, guys. We might just have to do
quarantine.
Let's see.
How this.
Oh, I saw you blink. Are we good?
I think we're good. Can you see me?
Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to the technical difficulties of Questions Unraveled. I apologize. Anyways, I was just talking about, I don't know if you caught the full ending of what I was talking about with the study in itself, but it's directly correlated to our health as well as our development. And I was just talking about how when I started to develop and coming into my early 20s, and I was like, ooh, I made it. I started to go, but what now? Mm-hmm. I know when I reached out to you and started to share my experiences with you, you're a few years older than me. You've started to experience therapy more in depth and see where that leads you. Your therapy in itself or getting help, what did that look like for you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is my 3rd time around in therapy. But first, I've been at the same center, which is the Sexual Assault Center in Nashville, Tennessee, as a nonprofit center to help those who have survived sexual assault. But the first time I did it was to get my mom to shut up. Honestly, she was like, "You need to go to therapy," because I only spoke out about what happened to me when I was 18. So there's a long gap of time from when it started even to when it ended that I didn't say anything. And she was like, "You need to go to therapy." And I was like, "Fine. If you shut up, I will go." So I went for out of spite. The second time I went was because my therapist ended up having to leave. And they were just like, "All right, you're assigned a new person." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I was like, "No, I think I need to graduate myself." And they're like, "Okay, well, if you feel comfortable not doing it anymore, we are not going to force you to." Um, there's probably about 4 years in between that. It was just bad. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't do the like stigma of, "Oh, she was sexually assaulted. She went off the deep end." No, I just literally just stopped giving a damn about life in general. I did not care. I was like, if I die, I don't care. Like, I
Which
didn't
is a
do
different
it.
point.
Yeah, I was like, no. But I was also so comfortable in that spot too, because I was like, this is familiar. I know this spot. Um, and then it just became too much. And I went into therapy, and I had actually had like 5 people mention EMDR therapy, which is basically, for layman's terms, it was developed for people with PTSD, and it moves your memories from the back of your brain to the front of your brain. So when it's in your frontal lobe, you can process it and go, "This is a memory. This is not currently happening." And I mentioned that to the intake person, and they're like, "Yeah, we have someone perfect. We think you like him." Um, I've been with him for about 2.5 years now. Greatest decision I ever made to make that call. And because I would be in 6 feet in the ground, dead, because it was just like, no. And this is, and it was, I had to, but still, after 2.5 years of doing it every single day or every single week, I have therapy part of me. I'm like, I don't want to do it today. I'm just going to call and cancel. And then I
Right.
do it, and I'm like, okay, glad I did it. But it's still something. Growing from trauma isn't a constant thing. Like you said, is something you're going to deal with till probably the day you die, because it affects, especially when it happens to you when you're younger and your brain is developing.
Right.
You're just like, it's kind of stuck there. But yeah, I'm not even gonna lie. I just felt myself disassociating completely, which is a trauma response. So, because it was like, "Nope, you're saying too much. You're speaking too much you're being personal. You're being too vulnerable." We don't like being vulnerable because it makes you seem weak to other people. But it actually shows people, it's like, if I was never vulnerable with you, uh, you would never know our similarities and importance of growth. And yeah, it's just, and everybody finds a type of therapy that works for them. But
Right.
the intense kind for me, because I'm a Capricorn, is like, let's do the hardest thing.
I know, just to draw back to the whole working through your trauma, I remember maybe 2 years ago, I was sitting on the edge of my bed and I was like, it was my fault what happened to me. And I
Yeah,
was still processing it like that. I was like, I put myself in that situation and that's why I was raped. And it stuck with me so deeply. And I had convinced myself through the trauma that it was normal, that it took me a year or so to actually acknowledge that being raped at 11 by a 17, 18-year-old boy is not acceptable. And I had convinced myself that it was consensual. And the thing is, your brain is not developed enough to even understand sex in itself. So when that was presented to me at 10 and 11 years old, I remember just not knowing what to do. And I even recently reached out about a year ago to one of the people that I had experienced that with. And I thought I would get some type of peace, some type of something. I don't know what I was looking for, but it was when I was on the self-discovery of actually dealing with the shit that had happened to me. And I sent this long, detailed message about how stripped I felt, the security that was taken from me, and how vulnerable I felt in those moments. And he said, "I'm sorry, you were just young and willing." And I remember in that moment going, I did not do this. I did not ask for this, and this is not mine to carry anymore. And I'm so angry that I have to carry this around when it was taken from me. And as I've stepped into actually dealing with what has happened to me and sharing it with my family and my friends and you and in this podcast, because that's why we're here, is to incite change. It's to talk about uncomfortable things. And I find myself healing with every single episode. I find myself not only challenging for more, but just looking to stay alive. And, you're so right. I remember looking at rock bottom and being like, you know what? It's kind of comfortable here. It's not that bad. And you do get in that place where you're so in fight or flight mode that when you hit rock bottom, you're like, well, at least this is safe. And at least this is predictable.
Yeah.
At least I know the people that are around me, the company that I keep, the things that I hear are going to be consistent. You're stupid, you're fat, you're not good enough, it's your fault. All of those things that we're taught by society and by the company that we keep. And I was like, I'll just put my feet up and I'm gonna reside here. I'm just gonna unpack. I'm gonna get comfortable. And so many people do that. And I know that I did that. And it almost killed me. And I know you remember this night when I called you and I told you, I said, I need you to tell me why I need to stay alive. And, I don't share this lightly because that was one of the most pivotal moments for me in my life. It was, 6 months ago when I closed the casket on my brother, something I never thought I was going to have to do. And all of this invasive trauma started coming back up. And I realized I had unpacked at rock bottom and didn't even know I did it because it was comfortable. And that's what I remember telling you that. I said, tell me why I need to stay alive. Tell me why I need to keep going. And you did that for me because you had already came out of rock bottom. And that is what this podcast is about. That is what we are about. Talking about things that people say, push under the rug. Don't talk about getting raped at 11 years old. Don't talk about being molested. Don't talk about family members and the drug addiction and all of these things. And I find each time that we get uncomfortable and we start to have the conversation that we get a little bit of control back. And I don't know if you can relate to that at all.
Yeah, it's definitely been a growth of within myself on how to communicate, because if you were to put my life into a movie, it would be on Lifetime with some cheesy plot line because it is that insane. Because like you name it, it's probably happened. I grew up in a house of addicts, both drug and alcohol. Was living in the house with the man who would.
Oh, we lost signal again, guys. Oh, goodness gracious. Phyllis, what'd you say? From the ages of birth to 7, we are like on mushrooms. Our development is on survival mode with neurotransmitters not fully developed. So many of us need some sort of therapy. You are exactly right. Exactly right. Take off,
Yeah.
girlfriend.
Yeah. So I apologize. Also, my internet, I live in a horrible spot of internet. But it's with that being said, like what you said of realizing you unpack at rock bottom, you're like processing when you're by yourself and you don't realize you are, or like the more you talk about it, you do gain back control. And sometimes um, finding someone who has had a sliver of similarities in your life, you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like, I'm not the only person this has happened to. And like you said, of bringing it back to when you said that he was like, oh, well, you were willing. I tried to, take mine to court when I first talked about it. And he said, at first he's like, what in the hell are you talking about? And then he said, well, and my dad, I was 8 when when it really started. He was like, well,
And I don't think we caught who it was when you went out of connection.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we caught.
Oh,
out of connection.
So it was a man that my mom was married to during the time it was happened. He had got her hooked on drugs, so that way he could control the entire situation. And but when I contacted him with the detective because he needed some sort of confession, he's like, "Well, if anything, you enticed me to do it."
Jesus Christ.
And I was 8. I was like, "All right." And he was like, and the detective was like, "That's enough." And then I just like stopped. I was like, "I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I can't. Like, I'm not." And that shit, I beat myself up every single day that I like. If like, should I go? Should I? And I'm like, I feel like I've got too far with my healing. That, but that's a conversation for another time. But I choose to actively like you did this to me, but I am no longer like my trauma is no longer a part of me. This is now it's now a story of mine to add on. Like this can be a part of me and help me become a stronger, more powerful, powerful version of myself. But this isn't my trauma doesn't define me. Like it's not. She's, you know, sorry, I saw a comment that just really shook me to the core that asked if I had fully forgiven myself. Yes and no, because sometimes I'm like, well, what did I do? Like, what did I do for this to happen? And I have to remind myself that I was a literal, excuse me, fucking child. Like, I have to remind myself of that actively. That it was like, nothing was your fault, but it's so hard to not think that and be like, well, was there something I could have done that like made them want to do it? He's like, no, they're just like jacked up in the head and they're disgusting vile people. And but yeah, so it's all a part of literally every single day choosing to I have to wake up every single day and as soon as my feet hit the floor, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna choose that my trauma is not gonna control my life today. Like
Absolutely.
all right. It's like the same as with addiction. You're like, all right, my addiction is not gonna control me today. My whatever is because if I don't and I don't tell myself that over and over and over again, I will let it. And I will sit comfortably in my bed in my pajamas and eat a whole bag of Cheetos.
Oh my goodness. You're so sweet, Jules. We love you too. You know, I think we become our own cheerleader in the most tacky, goofy way possible to, explain that. But like you said, when my feet hit the floor, I wake up and I go, it's not going to beat me today because I know what it feels like for it to beat me. I have days where it beats me, And I think that's something that I just want to reiterate is it's not peachy keen. Healing is not a blissful patch of flowers. It feels like shit. It is shit. And it is hard and it is painful. But I promise you, if you are in that space where you're like, I don't know, I'm unpacked down here, I'm comfortable. There's a lamp, I've got Roku. It's not too bad. But if you will just kind of take those blinders off, because when you go through extensive trauma, especially at a childhood level, and you experience your parents getting divorced, or that is a destruction of your home. You're getting something ripped apart that you don't even have the capacity to understand at such a young age. Something that is considered societally normal is destructive to the development of a child. So I think we get in this place where we literally do this with our trauma. We're like, as long as I can see what's in front of me and know that I am safe and that I am fed and I am well, this doesn't matter and this doesn't matter. But it is right here in your face every single day until you look at it and go, you are not mine to carry. I did not do this. I did not ask for it. And I will not allow it to be indicative of who I am and where I am going. And I struggle with that every single day. If you are struggling with that, and if you feel like you cannot keep going, I promise you that first step that feels like shit is one of the most synchronized with beauty steps you will ever take. It's like when it's a really pretty day and you're at the park and you step in dog shit. That's what the first step of acknowledging your trauma is like. And it's hard. It is painful. And when I really sat with myself, I started to realize that I was talking about things to inspire people and make them feel better, because everyone kept telling me I had this gift. And it's really funny because Alicia called me out, which, if you guys obviously don't know Alicia, but she is the founder of Everybody. And we were sitting in her house and it was just her and I. And she said, "You're not you. You want me to believe that you're you, but you're just giving people what they want to see and hear. But there's someone beneath you that's waiting to actually be able to exist, and you're not allowing it to, because of your trauma and because of the shit that you've got going on. And the only person that's going to stop that is you." And I was like, I'm never coming back over here again. but it was a moment for me where I was just like, damn, she's right. And I did that. I continued to do it after the conversation. I left her house and I was like, I'm going to change my life. No, it's not that easy. And I kept going in the right direction, because we all have hopes that we're going to get there. There's no roadmap to overcoming pain or trauma. And honestly, I buried it so deeply, even in therapy, I would just mull over it. And the truth of the matter is, you're not ready to heal until you make the conscious choice. It's waiting on you. Prosperity is waiting on you. There is a tomorrow. There are better days, but you have to expect them, and you have to claim them, and you have to speak highly of them. Because if you don't say, today, I'm going to have a good day. Today, the fear does not own me. The pain of my childhood, the broken relationships that I have with my family will not own me. And they also will not be indicative of what my relationships are going to look like today. With my parents, growing up, my father was an alcoholic. Of course, it was when I was very young, but it still had an implement effect on who I became. And then, my mother was so young. They were so young, and they adopted my three cousins and raised them. And to look at them now and go, I could not imagine doing that in my 20s. And I think a lot of healing is realizing that empathy is important. And I'm not saying, oh, every bad thing that someone's ever done to you, forgive them, or obviously do it in how you need to do. But with my relationship with my parents and my mom especially, I never thought we would be able to be where we are. I never did. And to be able to experience not only empathy, but the ability to forgive and understand and see something from their perspective and go, I'm upset that it happened. I'm upset that you didn't fully protect me, but I see why you were the way that you were. And now we're in this place where there's this raw honesty where we can talk to each other about all of these detrimental things that happen. And it's like they're validated and they're real. And my mother is my best friend. And I will say that until the end of time. I love her so deeply. And we are in this space now where it gives me hope, and it wants me, I want to be able to tell people that if you will just trust the process and give yourself room to not only breathe but to fall apart, things they realign. And I know your relationship with your mother is kind of like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it was really weird because I went through this, being honest, there's not something that a lot of people talk about with trauma, of especially if I'm only going to speak on my experience regarding this, because I don't want to, but my mom was on drugs while she was married to a man that was molesting me, and it was really, really hard for me to not blame her as well, even though he got her hooked. Like, he's the one who, but it was still hard for me and then that was something that I had to work through, and I had to have that conversation with her. And I was like, now I'm like, let's have these hard conversations, because I've had so many with myself. I'm really comfortable at, like, okay. But I used to be like, if someone would walk up to me and be like, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna cry, don't make me do this. But like, it was that difficult for me to like talk to anybody, because it was just like I didn't know how to function. But now my mom and I, like, we were really close when I was younger. Went through a weird spot when I was like in the pits of therapy, and now we're back to, like, again, she's my best friend and we are so close. But that's been something her and I both have had to work through, and I've had to admit, like, okay, yeah, I've had some nasty thoughts about you, because it's hard not to. But at the end of the day, she wasn't the one who put her hands on me. Like, she wasn't the one who did this. She wasn't. And it was also, I was trying so hard to actually put blame on everybody else except for the man who did it, because that meant I had to admit that it was as severe as it was. Because I would also, when I was younger, be like, oh, like, it would come up in conversation, like, it's not that big of a deal. And the second that I actually was like, no, this is a big deal, this is something serious, that I was able to be honest with myself. But I had to be honest with myself first about the severity of it, and that, like, yes, this happened, this happened, this happened. You need to be honest with yourself, because, like you said, you'd mull over it in therapy, like, whatever. I would do that too, because you're like,
I'm showing up. That's all that matters.
Yeah, you're like, I'm here. That's, for me, that wasn't enough. I had to, it's like, therapy is, like, my therapy is on Tuesdays. And even with work, and my bosses know, after 2:30 and my therapy starts at 3, I'm done for the day, because mentally, I'm like, night. I can't. I'm just like, I mentally can't do anything after, because put thing into that one session, because I know I've seen the darkness of where I can get, and I don't ever want to get back there again, like, ever.
Absolutely. I don't even know how to express what it feels like when you start to break through. You know what I'm talking about, because you've experienced it firsthand. And to anyone that is watching or that may see this later, there is a moment where and it's like, what is that? And you feel what normal air feels like. And you realize that your entire life you've been suffocated. your entire existence, where you've been walking around with this ailment, this sickness, because that is what trauma is. It takes over your nervous system. It takes over your ability to grasp things and see them for what they are. And I promise you, the second that you feel that shift in your reality, for me, it was just like, oh my God, I might actually make it. Because I know what it feels like to not have air. I know what, I describe trauma like the way the ocean works. You're fighting the tide. And every second that you think you've got your head above the water, it comes back in and there you're gone. And that's what it's like until you make the insightful decision to live. And there are so many people, not only in the United States, but this world alone, that are not breathing. They're not giving themselves the opportunity to not only live, but heal. And if you're seeing this now, I promise you, just make that choice to be in a little more pain for a little while, because it is ugly and it is nasty, and you have to look at it head on. And you convince yourself when you're in the trauma that the pain that you see and hear every day, it's like, this is normal, this is fine. And you become to accept it. But when you get to that moment, and I know you've experienced this too, where you go, I'm gonna lay this down. And then you start going, I'm gonna lay this down too. And then you're like, oh, I've already laid these things down, so I'm gonna toss that, because it's getting a little easier. I'm stretching, I'm getting more comfortable with myself and the reality of the situation. I'm setting boundaries within my relationships, and I'm getting well. Oh, it feels so damn good. It feels so good to look someone in the face and go, not only are you not going to speak to me like that, but we're not going to have a relationship because you're not good for me. And it's little things like that, little skills that when you're raised in trauma, you don't know how to do.
No, not at all. Not even the slightest.
Oh, your mom put up a sweet comment.
Oh.
That's mama right there, guys.
Yeah, also a little side note, I don't know if you saw the comment earlier, but someone, is this your doppelganger? There's one. So, but yeah, I completely 1,000% agree with you in the sense of, it's like, also finding a support system around you is, and that's something I've only realized probably the past couple of years, because and honestly, the reason I realize that is because of Alicia and Clint they are like my second parents. They are like everything to me. My godparents is what I call them, but they are also the founders and co-founder of Fashionista for Everybody, and they've just involved in my life. But it was the first time I had someone in my life who was not my family, to go to see me at my worst and still accept me and love me and push me to be better. And then I was like, what is this feeling? What is this feeling of acceptance and love? I don't like it. It's weird. I felt like the Grinch, when in Christmas and his heart grew, and I was like, no, stay small. Because it was like, and so they were the first people in my life to fully accept me and love me for all the baggage. Like, just call me an airport because I'm nothing but bags. And it was just all of that. And then I had like people like you come into my life, and then get more friends, and also just accept me for my trauma and like my really bad days. And then it also gave me the space to be open with them, be like, hey, I'm having a shit day today. They're like, great. What do you need to do for you? And I'm like, just like something to take my mind off. They're like, awesome, let's do that then.
Right.
And it also gave me the space to like just be comfortably vulnerable, because when you go through trauma, your brain goes, being vulnerable means something really bad is going to happen to you, and you're really weak. You're not allowed to be vulnerable. You need to have your like be prepared for the worst thing to happen at all times. Like constantly check your surroundings. And if you're vulnerable, you're not going to be prepared. And that's something that I had to learn over time, and just like accepting the fact that like there's a different side to the trauma. And you even made an analogy that I make with the ocean. Mine is always, it's like trauma is the top level right here of the ocean, like I don't know scientific terms of the ocean, so this is about as good as you're going to get, like not Bill Nye level, but you've got like the water, and then you, and it's like there's another person on the other side, and that other person is the opposite side of trauma. It's like you can see their hand, you're just like you cannot grab it to pull you to that other side. And then when you finally like breach that water, you're like, oh my God, and not every day is like that. No. Like I have more bad days than I have good days sometimes, especially this past year.
Which
But
brings
my good days are.
comment. I'm so glad that you said that, because I just saw this comment. I'm sorry to interrupt your flow.
No,
I was about to
please.
open the floor for questions, but I want to read this because Miss Miller said, breakthrough actually almost ruined me. So I feel different than what you're describing. And
No,
I just want to be very clear that up until now, I've tried to get better about 500 times.
Yeah.
At least. And I hated every damn second of it. So I don't want to try to describe trauma and overcoming it wrapped in this bow, because there were times when I absolutely thought I was not going to wake up the next day. And I want to be very real about that, and that within the healing, there is a dangerous side to it, and that you don't need to step into it alone. I believe that you do need to acknowledge what is going on within your life and go, what does this trace back to? Where does this come from? But I don't think we should believe that we are made to tackle things alone. We were built for connectivity. If you ever need to talk about that, or, want to have someone on your side, you can message either one of us, and we'll definitely have that conversation with you, and get to know you more, because hey, trauma sucks and getting over it sucks.
Yeah. Well, and to like be honest about the ugly parts, because I have to be, there would like quick trigger warning for self-harm really quickly for anybody. I would like slice my legs as self-harm. I growing up a child around addiction, I like barely drink. I will not eat like edibles or anything like that, because I'm so scared of becoming addicted in some way that won't become my coping as a mechanism. No, I just decide to inflict pain on myself. And I even, for a while, because so much hair, no one would see it, I'd actually pull out chunks of hair back here, and no one would see it. And I would bleed down my neck. But it was a form of control that I had. And it was like, I can feel this pain and I'm controlling this pain, so it's okay. And that's something that, like, yeah, the breakthrough side is great, but the getting there, I wanted to end my life every single day. Every day I woke up and I would be like, every night before I went to bed, I would pray out loud. I'm like, God, if you exist in some way, please do not let me wake up tomorrow, because I'm not going to kill myself, because I don't want to leave my family with that. I don't want to be another burden in another way, but please just don't let me wake up tomorrow morning.
And to be on the other side of that now, to look back,
yeah,
and I felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, there would like, there's even days where I'll be in the kitchen, like being completely frank, I'll be in the kitchen, like cooking dinner, and I'll be cutting a knife, and cutting, and I'm like, I could just real quick, like no one will know. Like I'm by myself, I could just real quick on my arm. And I'm like, no, we've worked really, really hard to not do this. Let's not relapse on self-harm, Kendall.
Right.
But it's true, and that's the ugly side. And I'm just so comfortable with talking about trauma as a whole at this point because I've had to, because of the type of person I am. I have to talk things out to fix it. I can't just like write it in a journal or like go on a run and get better because I'll have an asthma attack anyway halfway up the hill, so we're not doing that. But I'm like, I want to sit and have a hard conversation, and I do that with myself as well. Like full on in the shower, it's like a monologue. Because I would have like tried to die in some way, be like pay somebody to run me over at this point before I decided to get help. Be like, I will pay you. Here's money. Like, because I wanted to be anything but alive.
Right.
But there's another side, and it's hard to get there, but you can get there. And trust me, if I got there, I promise anyone can.
Absolutely. And, I'm just going to open the floor to anybody else that might have questions for us. And if not, then we're going to start wrapping this thing up. But we'll give you guys a second. I do just want to be very clear that it's not easy. And that's what this podcast is about. I joke, there's this term in the South where everyone says, just sweep it under the rug, just bury it. We shouldn't talk about those things. We shouldn't talk about sexual assault or drug addiction or who did what with who. And it's like, you know what? I don't even have a rug because I will not allow myself to convince myself that I'm not allowed to feel and I'm not allowed to honor the reality of the situation. And sometimes the reality of the situation is bad. And that's what we're all about over here is, getting a little uncomfortable and challenging ourselves to not only honor our truths, but to sit with them. And that's what we're doing. Oh, thank you so much, Kimberly. We thank you too. I'm so glad that you guys, watched this episode, and it's so close to my heart. And I got to share a little bit more about who I am and who I'm becoming. And I just want you all to know that this podcast is not only a safety net for you, but it's a safety net for me because I'm becoming, and that's what this is a part of. And I just want to thank you so much, Kendall, for coming on and sharing your story and being so honest and raw about your truths, because for all we know, and great hopes that it did save a life today. And I love you, and I love everyone that has watched this. And if you have anything else to say, we're going to hop off here.
I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak so openly and so freely, and also just being a part of my life in the way that you have. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, you know what this is. It's Questions Unraveled, where we get uncomfortable. We talk about things that are necessary for growth. And I appreciate you for saying that we are genuine, because that is one thing that I have promised myself. This show will be the foundation of reality and realization. No matter who likes it, I will light a fire under your ass, because you deserve to live and to live well. If I can say one person, and if I can convince one person to live a little bit outside of their belief system, I've done what I needed to do. So I will see you guys next weekend, and we are out of here.